I always thought silence was my weakness. Every time Caleb mocked my career, I smiled. Every time his mother called me the decorator doll, I nodded politely. But that night, when I found the bank transfer, 80 grand gone without a word, I didn't scream. I watched him sleep beside me like nothing had happened. That's when I realized something. The real power doesn't come from shouting. It comes from watching, planning, and waiting for the right moment. And mine had just arrived. He had no idea who I was becoming, or that soon his own boss would answer to me. When I married Caleb Calloway, I believed I had won the lottery. He was tall, sharp-jawed, with a voice that made strangers lean in when he spoke. The kind of man people followed into boardrooms and toasted in rooftop parties. And I, once a designer of modest living rooms, became his wife. A role with polished surfaces and polished silences. I gave up my small business without a second thought. He said, "We don't need your income. Just enjoy life." So I did. I decorated our home, hosted wine tastings, attended his clients' galas in tailored gowns, smiled at the right people, and never spoke out of turn. But somewhere in the quiet spaces between our curated life, something curdled. Caleb's compliments softened into condescension. At dinner parties, he'd joke, "Vanessa can name 300 shades of beige, but couldn't read a stock report if her life depended on it." People laughed. I did too. But the laughter left a metallic taste in my mouth. At home, his mother treated me like I'd won a beauty pageant and was coasting on the prize. "Smart girls don't need to prove anything," she'd say, handing me her glass like I was the maid. "Just make sure you stay pretty and agreeable. That's a woman's best weapon." One afternoon, I designed a concept board for a boutique hotel lobby, a space that balanced raw wood textures with ambient, smart lighting. I emailed it to Caleb, suggesting he forward it to his firm's real estate client. He opened the file in silence, scrolled, and muttered, "It's cute, Ness, but not exactly commercial level. Leave the business side to us." I said nothing. That night, I couldn't sleep. A week later, while Caleb was asleep, snoring lightly with his arm across my stomach like a weight, I checked our shared account. It was something I rarely did, but that night I needed distraction from the ache of being invisible. What I found instead was an $80,000 withdrawal labeled Strategic Reinvestment. I blinked, refreshed the page, same number, same cryptic note. I sat up. He stirred and opened one eye. "What are you doing?" he asked. "80,000? I said, my voice quiet. "Where did it go?" He yawned, rolled to his side. "I'm reallocating funds, for that investor thing. It's all under control. That's my name on that account." He didn't even flinch. "Babe, money in a marriage is shared. It's not like I spend it on watches. It's for us." For us. The irony scratched my spine. I nodded and said nothing. That morning, I ordered an old MacBook under a different name. That night, I dusted off my old credentials and enrolled in an online boot camp for blockchain-based product design. And for the first time in years, I didn't wait for Caleb to fall asleep before opening my laptop. I worked in slivers of time. Between charity luncheons and Pilates, I designed algorithms to learn user aesthetic preferences, built models that predicted mood from spatial lighting. I called it Hermes, not after the fashion brand, but the Greek messenger god, silent, swift, and underestimated. Hermes would design spaces that spoke without voices, just like I had learned to. 3 months later, Hermes had a working prototype. Not perfect, but promising. I pitched the concept anonymously on a design founders forum. Within days, I had DMs from curious developers and feedback from angel investors. But one message stood out. "Your model is premature, but the core is disruptive. I'll invest if you stay anonymous. Ghost CEOs make the cleanest empires. If you're serious, reply in 24 hours. There was no name, just a crypto wallet link and a line of code embedded in the message, my own signature encryption. He'd already tested the security of my system. He wasn't some casual browser. He was watching me, and he believed in what I had built. That night, I stared at Caleb as he kissed my cheek goodnight. He smelled like whiskey and leather, the kind of man who believed his world was unshakable. I smiled back, climbed into bed, and whispered, "Good night." In my mind, a different voice whispered back, "Welcome to the real game." By the end of spring, I had constructed an entire alternate identity. My name was never spoken, my image never captured, and my voice passed through modulators when necessary. To the outside world, I was EV, founder of Hermes, the AI interior design startup that had begun drawing whispers from early tech forums. In reality, I still hosted brunches with homemade granola, wore cream-colored dresses, and smiled politely while pouring mimosas for women who thought Pinterest was avant-garde. To maintain appearances, I told Caleb I'd taken on a stress relief side gig, doing biophilic plant care for luxury homes. He raised an eyebrow, almost amused. "You? Landscaping? That's cute. But hey, at least it keeps you busy." He kissed my forehead like I was a dog who'd learned a new trick. "Don't overthink it. Plants don't talk back." I laughed softly, walked away, and designed a smart ecosystem the next morning that could read room temperature, air quality, and mood patterns based on CO2 levels. I coded between Pilates sessions. On afternoons, I claimed to be at client homes. I was actually running beta tests inside a rented loft downtown, feeding Hermes real-world variables and refining aesthetic algorithms with a hired dev team who only knew me as an encrypted chat avatar. One Saturday night, Caleb threw a cocktail party at our place, a networking ritual that felt more like theater with every passing month. The house buzzed with muted jazz, curated cheese boards, and discussions about market volatility. I floated in like always, flawless and forgettable, my presence more set piece than participant. Then Caleb waved me over with his usual wine-drenched confidence. "Gentlemen," he announced, motioning to the small circle, "this is Vanessa, my wife and resident home artist. If you need someone to water your orchids with grace, she's your girl." Laughter. I smiled. One of the men turned to me, glass in hand. "Home artist, huh? What does that even mean?" Before I could answer, another voice cut in, low and familiar. "It means she understands how to make a space breathe even when people can't." I turned toward the speaker. Howard. Tall, graying at the temples, with eyes too sharp to belong at a party like this. Caleb had introduced him minutes earlier as the new head of strategy. I hadn't looked up. Now I stared. He was the one, the anonymous investor. His eyes met mine for a flicker too long. Then, just as Caleb reached over to refill a drink, Howard gave me a subtle nod, an unmistakable signal. I knew right then. The man who Caleb was hoping to impress now worked for me. 2 days later, Howard requested a private video call under the pretense of developing potential real estate intelligence. I joined from my studio, voice filtered, avatar engaged. "You've kept the mask well, Evie," he said, "better than most." "Privacy isn't vanity," I replied. "It's protection." He leaned back. $2 million. That's my next round. Equity optional, but you stay ghost. No public image, no name. Power is cleanest when it doesn't have a face. I didn't hesitate. Agreed. Hermes scaled fast. With the cash injection, I hired a second AI team, secured partnerships with boutique luxury developers, and launched a private beta in Aspen and Palm Springs. The platform could now detect emotional shifts in clients based on environment engagement. Colors changed subtly. Textures suggested calm. It wasn't just design. It was psychology, wrapped in style. Then I moved quietly. With Howard's guidance, we acquired a 40% stake in Larkin plus Rowe, the design agency used by Caleb's bank. I never showed my face, never appeared on documents, but my signature fingerprint was on every contract. Caleb never noticed. He was too busy bragging about closing a 5-year vendor relationship with Hermes' new AI guys. The irony would have been hilarious if it weren't so tragic. One evening, as we sat down to dinner, Caleb tossed his phone on the table and grinned. "Big win today," he said. "Bank's executive floor is getting a full redesign. Guess who landed the project?" I stabbed my salad a little harder than usual. "Who?" He smirked. "Hermes, some hot new AI firm from California. CEO's anonymous, but they've got taste." I chewed slowly. "Anonymous?" "Yeah, nobody knows who runs it. Kind of sexy, right? A faceless genius makes it more valuable somehow." I nodded, biting back a laugh. "Sounds like a perfect fit." As Caleb sipped his wine, content in his little victory, I stared at the city lights outside our window and felt the strange, sharp joy of quiet dominance. He had no idea the empire he was helping build belonged to me. The email came in on a Tuesday morning. I recognized the domain immediately. Caleb's corporate inbox. The subject line read, "Immediate adjustments needed. Hermes aesthetic concerns." I opened it with the same stillness I'd learned to cultivate over years of silencing myself. "Dear Hermes team," it began, "while your AI-generated designs are unique, there is concern from our executive team that the current layouts lack corporate gravitas. Please provide a revised draft within 48 hours with a more traditional aesthetic. Minimalism is not professionalism. Regards, Caleb Calloway." He signed his name like a stamp of superiority. I responded under my avatar handle as EV. With a single-line reply, "Professionalism is measured by impact, not marble columns. Expect a proposal in 24 hours." He replied almost instantly, "You're confident." I typed back, "I'm not guessing." That week, the redesign Hermes submitted, my design, went viral inside their board. Mood-responsive executive floor read the headline of an internal feature. The firm's founder forwarded it with the subject line, "Finally, this is the future." Caleb didn't reply to that email. Instead, 3 nights later, a message came through Hermes' direct channel. "EV, this is Caleb Calloway. I'd like to meet. Your direction intrigues me. I believe a conversation could streamline this project." My breath hitched for one wild second, but then I leaned back, fingers poised, and typed, "Hermes policy mandates executive meetings be conducted remotely. Video only. I'll schedule a slot." I set the call for Friday, 8 p.m. When the screen lit up, my avatar appeared, just as it always had, a faceless, elegant silhouette against a soft gradient. Voice modulated, lighting shadowed. Caleb appeared on his end in a dark button-down, wine glass half full, eyes narrowed. "So you're the mind behind Hermes," he said, tilting his head. "Didn't expect a voice that calm." "Calm is productive," I said. He chuckled. "You sound familiar." I stayed silent. "I have to admit," he continued, leaning forward, "I thought your firm was a gimmick. AI decor, emotional mapping through lighting. But then I saw the last mock-up and something changed. I can't explain it, but it felt like the room was breathing." "Design should do that," I replied. "Make you feel understood before you speak." Caleb nodded, visibly intrigued. "You're dangerous. That's not an insult." "It's accurate." He laughed again. "I've met a lot of voices behind ideas, but none that made me want to sit down and just listen. You're a hard person to forget." The irony of him falling under the spell of his own wife, repackaged, filtered, and unseen, was almost too delicious to bear. I gave him nothing. Let him project, wonder, fall deeper into the illusion I'd built pixel by pixel. As the meeting ended, he said softly, "I hope this isn't the last time we talk." "It won't be," I replied, "unless you stop listening." By the following week, he was copying me directly in every Hermes email chain. His tone softened. Less command, more curiosity. He forwarded internal reports asking for my feedback. He quoted me in meetings. He even told Howard, not knowing the connection, that Hermes had an edge we need to learn from. And then came the shift. A memo from the upper board cited conflicts of interest and poor performance alignment. Caleb was removed from the Hermes project, effective immediately. In his place, Howard was announced as Chief Creative Officer overseeing the Hermes collaboration. It was a demotion dressed as a restructure. Caleb stormed into our home that night, pacing the hallway, phone clenched in hand. "They're replacing me," he growled, "with Howard. That old bastard doesn't even understand the tech." I sat on the edge of our bed, brushing my hair calmly. "Didn't you say he was brilliant just 2 weeks ago?" Caleb didn't answer, just hurled his phone across the room. It bounced, hit the rug, and landed screen up. Still lit, still useless. I stood, walked to the window, and stared out at the skyline. Maybe they want someone who listens better. He looked at me then, confused, angry, lost. The first cracks had begun to show, and he had no idea how wide they would spread. The thing about long cons is they don't just fool the target. They change you too. I no longer felt like I was surviving Caleb. I was orchestrating him. And he had no clue he was already dancing to music I'd written months ago. We launched the update at dawn. Hermes 2. Zero, the world's first AI that not only responded to environmental cues, but also learned emotional behavior through user interactions, dropped into the market with no fanfare. Just a silent press release and a private demo shared to select global firms. Within 24 hours, the ripple effect turned into a wave. Tech publications called it the emotional architecture revolution. Investors called it the next Apple of space. Designers called it witchcraft. Howard called me. "They're coming," he said. "The majors. We'll be fielding acquisition offers by next week." I nodded from behind my screen. "Let them circle. Just make sure they don't touch the center." He paused. "The board is pushing for a public-facing CEO now. Press wants a face. Investors want a brand. They want you to step forward." "No," I said without blinking. "The second I become a woman in public power, I stop being seen as the mind behind the machine. They'll ask about my lipstick, not my logic." Howard didn't argue. He never did. A few days later, he sent over the acquisition interest list. Fifth from the top was a name that chilled me for all the wrong reasons: Cresswell Holdings. I stared at it for nearly a minute before clicking the breakdown. A controlling shareholder, Louise Calloway, Caleb's mother. I hadn't heard from her in over a year. Last I saw her, she had handed me a lavender-scented envelope that read, "You're better off staying home. Let Caleb handle the world." And now, here she was, trying to buy mine. Howard called again. "They've offered $200 million for a 40% stake. Their only requirement is that the operating team remains in place." "And she knows I'm the operator?" He hesitated. "Not yet." I signed the deal the next morning. The meeting happened in a penthouse overlooking the Hudson. Louise arrived in a black sheath dress and pearls so tight they looked like armor. She extended a hand, offered a tight smile. "I trust the operator is present?" she asked. "She's always been here," I replied. "You just never looked hard enough." The room went quiet. We signed the papers in silence. When she turned to leave, she glanced back just once. "I should have taken you seriously." "You never had the chance," I said. "You were too busy playing queen to notice the pawn was building her own board." The news broke within hours. Hermes now had strategic backing from one of the biggest tech conglomerates on the East Coast. Media swarmed the surface, but no one breached the center. I remained faceless, voiceless, and in complete control. Later that night, Caleb showed up at my door. He looked different. Not broken, but off balance. Like someone who knew they'd been playing the wrong game all along. "I know everything," he said, stepping inside without waiting for permission. "Mom told me. You, Hermes, you've been building this right under my nose." I said nothing, just walked to the kitchen and poured a glass of water. "I was an idiot," he said. "I thought I was the one leading. Turns out I was a step behind the whole time." I finally turned to face him. "What do you want, Caleb?" "To fix this, to be on the same side again. We were good together. At least we can be a team now. Hermes needs stability. Optics. We could present as a couple. Strong. Strategic." I smiled, cold, small, and surgical. You used me when it suited you, as a wife, as an ornament, as a resource. But I don't use people, Caleb. I replace them." His face hardened, jaw tightening. "You think this ends well for you? Going solo, faceless, fighting people like my mother?" "I'm not fighting," I said. "I'm delivering the invoice." The next week, Caleb was suspended from his firm. An internal audit initiated under a clause Howard had inserted months earlier revealed misappropriated funds, unauthorized asset leverage, and 3 buried attempts to steer contracts back toward his former allies. His office was cleared, his name scrubbed. The final message I received from him was short. I should have listened. I didn't reply. Instead, I stood in my studio that night, watching the Hermes dashboard light up with new contracts. Dubai, Tokyo, Sao Paulo. I had built an empire from silence. And now, everyone who once underestimated me had no choice but to sit back and watch me burn down everything they believed untouchable. And I wasn't done yet. The lights in my studio stayed on long after the rest of Manhattan went to sleep. I stopped counting the nights I didn't. My phone pinged with alerts I never opened. Journalists, analysts, strangers with theories. The weight of being unseen had once felt like a shield. Now, it felt like a spotlight with no off switch. Every headline speculated. Every investor demanded clarity. My silence, once mysterious, was now calculated opacity. Forums debated if Hermes was a shell company. People I'd once lifted, dev teams, freelancers, partners, began to pull away, accusing me of hiding behind anonymity to dodge accountability. I wanted to tell them that the silence had been my freedom, not my weapon. But freedom doesn't explain itself. Then it happened. A small blog, not even a major outlet, ran a piece titled, "Hermes CEO is the decor wife you forgot." It had pictures, old wedding shots, a still from that gala in year 1. Caleb's hand on my waist, my face tilted just enough to be unmistakable. Within hours, it was everywhere. I read the article in my studio, hands ice cold, the cursor blinking over an unfinished model. It detailed my supposed transformation, but not as triumph. They framed it as deceit. From wife to whisper empire. How Vanessa Calloway crafted a business behind her husband's back. They didn't mention the theft, the mocking, the nights I built alone, just the betrayal of image. How dare I build a world while wearing pearls and serving wine? My inbox imploded. Howard called 3 times. I didn't answer. When I finally left the studio, a man with a camera followed me 3 blocks. A woman hissed, "Fake feminist," under her breath as I walked past her stroller. And then came the message from Mia Calloway, Caleb's younger sister. "Hey, Vanessa, crazy news cycle, huh? Want to grab coffee and just talk? No pressure." I hadn't spoken to Mia in over a year. Last I saw her, she'd shown up to one of my early beta meetings under the guise of just being curious. Back then, I was desperate for support. I let her in. I told her things, more than I should have. The next morning, Howard confirmed the source of the leak. It was Mia. She'd copied confidential onboarding files from an old shared drive I'd forgotten to secure. Then she sold them, not to tabloids, to a competitor. The same firm now petitioning for Hermes to be investigated for investor fraud. And it didn't stop there. Howard dug deeper. Mia had been acting under instruction, proxy for a temporary shareholder who had recently acquired dormant stock through a private transaction. Caleb. Before his removal, he'd moved 5% of Hermes-related equity into Mia's name. It wasn't illegal, but it was a message. He couldn't destroy what I'd built, so he'd chosen to poison it instead. I sat in the boardroom the following week, face bare, eyes hollow. They demanded I appear. "To show transparency," they said. The chairs were filled with people who had profited off my brain and now looked at me like a rogue variable in their system. A woman at the end of the table, who once called my emotional design model genius, asked the question plainly. "Were you ever going to tell the public who you really were?" I answered quietly. "I already did, through the work." But the public doesn't trust ghosts anymore." The room nodded. And just like that, the narrative wasn't about what I built. It was about the role I used to play. They weren't asking if Hermes worked. They were asking if I was ever really a CEO or just a wife with a clever grudge. I left the meeting without saying goodbye. That night, I walked through the old neighborhood, past the grocery store where I used to pick out Caleb's favorite olives, past the dry cleaner that still had my initials on a tag inside, past the apartment building we lived in when ambition was still quiet between us. I stood on the corner and realized something that made my throat close. They would never see the architecture I designed, only the apron I used to wear. I set up the camera at sunrise. No makeup, no script, just me, a glass of water, and a room I designed to feel like truth. For the first time, I didn't speak through Hermes, or a filter, or a modulated voice. I opened my own mouth and let the weight fall out. "My name is Vanessa Calloway," I said. For years, I let people tell me what I was worth. I let them call me decoration, distraction, something to be managed. I smiled through it. I performed quiet. I performed pleasant. I convinced myself that staying silent was survival. But it wasn't. It was a pause, a deep breath before the rebuild. I didn't cry. I didn't plead. I told them about Caleb, about the money, about the night I found that withdrawal and knew something had snapped. I told them about the long nights building Hermes, not as revenge, but as proof that I existed beyond their version of me, that what they saw wasn't the whole of what I carried. I didn't build Hermes to win. I built it because I was tired of apologizing for thinking bigger than my living room. I stared into the lens for a long moment. Imposter syndrome doesn't belong to women. It belongs to people who underestimated us. Then I smiled. "Im lang kong phai yu joy," I said, breaking into Vietnamese for the first and only moment because no translation felt right. "Im lang la chuan bi." Within hours, the video hit 3 million views. Within days, it became a movement. Women wrote from all over the world, CEOs, artists, mothers, daughters, saying they saw themselves in me, in my silence, in the way I built something out of being dismissed. The hashtags changed. Not about the scandal anymore, not about the betrayal, just voice to value. Hermes stock doubled in a week. But more than that, something shifted underground, quietly, steadily, a pulse, as if thousands of other women were building their own Hermeses now, not for profit, but for proof. We launched a mentorship platform, Woven, not a self-help program, a system, a design model for women rebuilding from the ashes of dismissal, disrespect, and divorce. I invited those who had been pushed into corners to sketch out the rooms they wanted to walk into, and we built them together. In the middle of it all, my inbox chimed, a message from an old number. "Louise, Vanessa, I saw the video. I was wrong about you, about everything. If you're willing to talk, I'd like to make things right." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I archived it. Some things deserve no reply. Caleb disappeared from the media. Quiet settlements, shuttered projects, friends who forgot his number. Occasionally, I saw him mentioned in a byline, like a ghost story in a forgotten newsletter. But the world had moved on. So had I. I poured my energy into building the fund, voice to value, a multi-million-dollar investment arm seeded from Hermes profits. Its mission was simple: fund women with ideas that had been laughed at in rooms where they weren't invited. Give power to those told they were too loud, too emotional, too decorative to matter. A journalist from The Atlantic called one afternoon. She wanted a quote for a feature. The headline, "The Woman Who Redefined the Power Curve." I told her, I didn't redefine it. I just stopped asking permission to climb it. The piece went viral again. But this time, it wasn't about my fall or rise. It was about the architecture of power. How a woman once dismissed as a silent wife had redrawn the entire floor plan. One night, I walked through Union Square during a street fair. The crowd moved around me. Music, laughter, heat from the food stalls. No one recognized me. And that was the point. I wasn't trying to be seen anymore. I was trying to build a world where women didn't have to lose everything just to be taken seriously. I moved through the crowd invisible again, but this time by choice. Unbothered, untraceable, and for the first time in my life, truly unbreakable.